Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my channel. Since recently I'm preparing for a very important tournament, I won't be able to follow the footsteps of those recent top events. I won't be able to record, make recaps of these games that happened in the recent top events. So I'm pre-recording this series, and this series contains games or positions that my coach at my chess school has taught us. My coach is an international master, very strong, and he carefully shows all of these supplies, like games and positions, and then taught all of these things to us, including openings, middle games, and as well as end games. Now it's actually very useful, and I'm sharing all of these things that I have learned at chess school with you guys. And I also think it's a great way for me to review the things that I have learned at school. All right. Today, we'll be taking a look at a game played between Alexander Onischuk versus Anthony Bacrot. Now, these two players, some of you guys might be unfamiliar with them. They were they're not the most they're not the strongest grandmasters, of course. This game was played in 2011. So right now, both players are about in their 40s. I'm not sure, but at least not in the 20s or 30s. So they were pretty this game was actually played about 13 years ago, pretty long time actually. The thing that is worth for us to study about this game is especially the opening part, which is the King's Indian defense. And actually recently my coach has been teaching us or sharing games that start with the King's Indian defense. This opening, some of you guys might say the King's Indian defense is not a great opening because nowadays people they just use the computers and have already analyzed all of the lines that are possible for black, and all of the variations are good for white. It's true, the evaluations does say that it is much better for white, but actually the opening, since the King's Indian defense is a large opening series, it's still there are many lines that are playable, and if for example you're playing as white and you did not analyze all of the lines that accurately for black, there are still some counterplay in it. And today we'll be taking a look at this game. Here white is Onischuk and black is Bacrot. It doesn't matter who the players are, basically. The most important thing is to study the games. Here, white Onischuk started with d4, of course, and then we transfer into the King's Indian defense after g6, knight d3, and bishop g7, of course. e4, d6, knight f3, short castle, bishop e2, and e5. This is all the most standard line of the King's Indian defense. And after e5, here there are many options for white, basically. You can actually just go short castle here to leave the center alone. You can even take on e5, or go d5, or play the move that has been played in the game, which is to go bishop e3. Now, bishop e3 is not the most common reply here. The more common reply will be either to go d5 or go short castle. Short castle is slightly more common, and probably after knight c6, then go d5. This is just something that I think even if you don't play the King's Indian, but you still can recognize this pawn structure. In the game, bishop e3 was played, giving black the option to take with e takes d4, which is possible. Or if you just want to play normally, you can also go knight e6. But here, bishop e3, the main point is that black can now actually just take on d4. This was actually played in the game. But another option would be for black to go knight g4. You might ask, why not just kick this bishop? Well, kicking this bishop is of course possible. And here, for white, you have to know that you cannot retreat the bishop back to either c1 or d2 because that will just be a waste of tempo. But what you should do here, of course, you have to move the bishop. you should go bishop g5 here, attack the queen, and of course black will go f6 here. But even though like you are wasting another move and luring, you're actually like luring black to go f6, because now black goes f6. Finally, you get the bishop back to h4. And let's say black goes g5, you go bishop g3. Even though the bishop has already moved 4 times in the opening, yeah, it is wasting some couple of like moves. But you see that now black's pawns are all lured and like they're all pushed further up the board. This means that there are like weaknesses, weak squares created in black's king side. These light squares as well as these f6 and e5 pawn now block this g7 bishop completely, which also gives white some h4 ideas later on. Knight g4 is possible, of course, for black. And as for white, you have to know that you have to go bishop g5 if black goes knight g4. In the game, however, Vachier he played e takes d4, which is the best move here. And here, which piece will which piece will you use to take this pawn? To take with the queen, to take with the bishop, or take with the knight? In the game, knight takes d4 was played, which is the best move. Now, if you take with the bishop, which is possible but not as good as knight takes d4, there is now rook e8 attacking this e4 pawn, and probably you'll have to do something like knight d2 to defend the pawn, which is like the position looks kind of ugly for white because you're like retreating all the pieces back and it doesn't seem that convenient. And if you take with the queen, well, obviously taking with the queen will just fall into this diagonal. I'm not saying like you're losing any material here, but after knight g4, a discovered attack, you have to move the queen away, and after, for example, queen d2, now there's just something like knight e3, you are like giving up the bishop here in the opening, and also this g7 bishop is now wide open to this whole diagonal. This is just much better for black with the bishop here. Alright, that is why taking with the knight is definitely the best option. Knight takes d4, and in the game rook e8 is played. Rook e8, very logical, attacking the e4 pawn, but the main difference of knight d4 and bishop d4 is that now there's this f3 move. You see, before when you take with the bishop, the knight is on f3, which means that there are no f3 ideas for white. But now you take with the knight, and after rook e8, there's f3 to defend, which is very logical for white. In the game, c6 was played. Now, at this very specific position, I want you guys to have, once you saw this position or something similar to this position, you know that black is threatening to go d5 on the next move, either on the next move or after a couple of moves. At least it will be a long idea. It will always be one of black's ideas to create counterplay in the center. d5 is actually really deadly. Especially here when white's king is still in the center and the pawn, not the pawn, but the bishop on e3 has it's unprotected. You see, there are no pieces protecting or defending the bishop. And here, if you go short castle here, this was not played in the game because it's not a good move, short castle. And after d5, there's probably now c takes d5, and for black, probably take with the knight. Here is even more beautiful. After knight takes d5, if you take with the e pawn, there's rook e3, of course. And if you take with the knight, there's now just c takes d5. And the center is basically the e4 pawn is slightly a bit weak. It cannot move because the e3 bishop again is unprotected. But white's pieces are somehow they're uncoordinated. They're not defending each other. They're not acting well. So if reaching this position, I think black is just much easier to play with. He's just threatening to take on e4 on the next move. And what is white's reply? It's actually really hard for white to play. Probably white can play something like queen b3, to defend the bishop. But black will just keep on developing the pieces, and there's nothing that could basically happen to black here. Alright, let's go back to see what happened in the game. Onishuk realized that there was this d5 idea coming up, and he played bishop f2, which is very logical. Now you have to notice that queen d2 here is a little bit tricky actually here, because there's after d5 and after, let's say, c takes d5, and if you take on, for example, if you take on d5. Well, unfortunately here after knight takes d5, there's something like, well, of course you cannot take, because if you take, there's now queen takes d5 and everything is being attacked. But let's say you just move anywhere else, like, I don't know, like even here, not sure, castle of course, but probably like bishop g5 to attack the queen. But let's just say there's just queen d7, for example. Like in black's territory, all of the pieces are being protected. They are protecting each other, and the white's king is still in the center, which is not a good thing. In this position, black is just having no problem with his own development and everything. Queen d2 is not a good move, and that is why bishop f2 was played instead. Still, like, there is d5, but d5 now at least it doesn't have the biggest effect on white anymore. Oops. Oh, spoiler alert. Hope you guys didn't see that. Well, maybe you saw the result. It's a draw, of course. But still, like, the process is also really important. c6, and after bishop f2, d5 was played, following black is following his own plan. And after e takes d5, if you take with the c pawn here, there's now c takes d5, and I mean you should always take with the e pawn instead of taking with the c pawn. And now reaching this position, I mean if you take on d5 again, there's knight d5, and there's also this really annoying pin. It's still best for you to take with the e pawn. I mean after c takes d5, now the main point is that you can always go c5 here. You should always remember that in this specific King's Indian variation, when black is threatening to go d5, you should always have the idea in your mind that you can always reply with c5 if black goes d5. Probably after a few exchanges, but you'll always have this c5 option. Of course, right now you can go c5, of course, but it's even better for you to get the king to safety first, which is to go short castle. And after knight c6, then go c5 to at least close up the center and like lower the pressure, like decrease the pressure in the center, of course. And after c5, like suddenly everything is again back to normal. And after rook e5, which was played, this is actually a really tricky move. This move not only defends the d5 pawn, but also creates some rook g5, rook h5 ideas to swing over to the king side. Another idea is actually to get the queen to the e8, for example, or like to move to f8 even. Like, you know, to, for example, attack the c5 pawn or double up on the e file. Like, there are many ideas with this rook e5 move. Now, in the game, bishop b5 was played, a very accurate move played by white, because if you just do something else like, for example, like, I don't know, for example, here after bishop, you don't go bishop b5, and it's actually worth noting is that if you go f4 here to attack the rook, now you just fall for black's trick, because if you go, like, black will just go back to rook e8, and you see that, like, black is kind of like luring white to go f4, because now the e4 square and the f5, not the f5, but especially the e4 square, these light squares are now completely weakened, and actually black will able like to get the knights to e4, and there are many counterplay actually. So this is one of black's idea as well, to trick white into going f4. But also another, like an even better move here is actually to go a6 here to prevent white from going bishop b5, because bishop b5 is one of the main counterplay here for white to put pressure on the c6 knight. So if black had gone for a6, this would have been even more accurate. But I guess rook e5 is just, it's also okay. And after bishop b5, bishop d7, and queen a4. So you see that white is putting all the pressure on the c6 knight. But of course, black is able to defend with, for example, rook c8. You could also just defend with queen c7. Both are, like, all these ideas are completely fine. Rook c8 was played in the game, and here, white played a not so accurate move, which is to go rook fe1, offering a trade of rooks. But I guess this is just unnecessary. An even more accurate move here is actually just to go bishop takes c6, and after, for example, you take with the bishop, you can just simply gobble up this a7 pawn. Even though this is a side pawn, but still, a pawn is a pawn, and probably later on you can go and force a trade with the queens. And once you traded off the queens, you can start pushing the pawns on the queen side to create passed pawns and just like immediately win the game. Of course, it's a long idea, but you have to have these kinds of ideas to look further into the future. You could also take with the b pawn, of course, but oops, what is that? You can also take with the b pawn, of course, but still there's queen a7 and queen b6 ideas. And white is just up, like a very healthy pawn. But I guess, like, in the game, Onishuk was a little bit suspicious about that. He didn't, like, want to take that pawn, but instead wanted to keep on attacking in the center. And he played rook fe1, offering a trade of rooks, which is not entirely wrong, but considered as an inaccurate move. Rook e1 was played, and after rook takes e1, knight takes d4. I mean, rook fe1 just gives black the chance to trade all the pieces off the board. And after knight d4, bishop takes d4, bishop c6. This is an excellent defending move by Vachier, because if he keeps on trading the pieces with, for example, bishop b5, this will just allow white's knight to take on b5 and threaten some knight d6 ideas, also attacking the pawn. Let's say you were to defend it with a6, but now there's knight d6, and basically if you go rook c7, there's now just something like queen a5 to pin everything here, and I think white should be winning with all of these very active pieces coordinating with each other. Now, if you go, well, obviously you cannot go bishop f8 to attack the d6 knight, because there's something like bishop f6, and after queen f6, there's queen c7 winning the rook, obviously. Alright, so bishop c6 is actually a really well defending move, because if you take on a7 right now, it actually doesn't work that well, because after queen a7, there's now just this actually really brilliant move. It's a little bit hard to spot, but you guys can actually pause this video and think, what move will you make here to win? Actually, it's an only move that black can win here, and it's like a discovered attack, but not that clear. So I hope you guys found this brilliant move with knight to g4, because if you go, for example, if you take with the knight, if you take the knight, there's bishop d4 check, obviously, and after king h1, there's now, for example, queen h4, even though black is still down a pawn, but the king is way too in danger, and it's the queen on a7 is way too far away from the action. And let's say black is even attacking the rook right now, and if you run away with the rook, for example with rook f1, there's now bishop e5 threatening mate, and if you go h3, there's queen g3 obviously, and disaster will just start to happen. And if you go g3 here, but there's queen takes g4, your king is just way too open, and I mean this is just completely winning for black. Knight g4 is an excellent move here, and the best reply to knight g4 is actually to retreat the queen back. If you take on g7 here, if you take bishop g7, there's again queen h4 threatening queen h2 as well as queen e1. Both are really deadly threats, but cannot be stopped at the same time, so this is also winning for black. The best reply is actually to go queen a4 to quickly retreat the queen back, but still it is a little bit late, because there's now either queen h4 or rook a8, and after rook a8, there's now, for example, queen d1, let's say, just trying, white is trying his best to defend, but now the only move here for black to win is with queen h4, and after f takes g4, there's bishop takes d4, and everything is just falling apart in white's side, and yeah, this is just resignation coming up. Alright. But of course, knight g4 is a really hard move to spot. Maybe in the game white saw that, but I guess even if white had saw that, it's still really this line is still really amazing. And if anyone can calculate that line or get to that position that we've just analyzed, that person will be extremely strong. In the game, bishop c6 was played, and after here queen d1, retreating the queen back here. Queen a5 was played, very logical, attacking the b5 bishop, and bishop f1 retreating back. Rook e8 offering a rook trade, and after taking everything off, we're now into the endgame part where it's the queens and the minor pieces. Queen d2 was first of all played, very logical, just, defending everything. And after bishop takes d4, queen takes d4, knight c7, defending the d5 pawn. And after b4, actually, even though here white's pawns may seem like pushed like much higher up the board than black's pawns are, but sometimes, especially in these kinds of endgames, when your pawn is pushed way too high up the board, sometimes you can create weaknesses like weak pawns. For example, this pawn on a2 is a weak pawn. Also weak squares, creating this a3 square for the opponent's queen to get into your position. And sometimes it's just hard to defend them, also giving black some knight b5 ideas coming up. b4 was first of all played, and here black played this really tricky move, not to get away with the queen work with, for example, like queen a3, because there's b5 of course, but instead black played this knight e6 move, and after knight e6, b takes a5 was played, both sides traded off the queens, and after knight to d4, a6, and after a6, b takes a6, bishop takes a6, knight e6, attacking the c5 pawn. Actually, in this position, I mean, black is just up a pawn, and it's amazing that white is able to hold this position at the very end. And after king f2, going up with the king, knight c5, bishop c8, like d4 was played, knight e2. Now it's worth noting is that you cannot go d3 here, because, like, I mean, you can, but it's not a good move, because after d3, there's now knight c3, and the pawn will be just stuck on d3. And after king e3, for example, like, this pawn will be trapped here, and white will be able to find a way to take it. And yeah, of course, black saw this and instead played this bishop d5 move, and saying that, okay, if you're attacking my pawn, I'm gonna take yours. And after knight takes d4, bishop takes a2, like this position, black is up like a passed pawn on the a file, but like, of course, black is the side who is going for the win, that's for sure, but the advantage is still not that high, not that enough for black to win, but of course, white needs to play extremely accurate to hold the draw. In the game, knight c6 was played, and after a6, king e3, going up with the king. The main advantage here that white has is that the king is much faster than black's king, because black's king is still on g8. Like, if the king were already on d5, for example, I think black will just be completely winning. But luckily for white, the king is still on g8, a little bit far away from the action, and white is able to hold the draw. Now here, bishop e6 was played, and after trading off the bishops, it's still amazing that black, in the end, cannot win this position, because when my coach is teaching us, like giving us the lesson about this position, and reaching this position, he said that, like, in the end, like, white played really accurately, and I mean, this is not that obvious to see how black is gonna win, but I guess, like, still, probably when you're playing like a board to board game, like person to person, it's like sometimes you're under time pressure, for example, and it's not that hard to see. In the game, king e4 was played, king g7, and let's just quickly see how this game ended. First of all, like, black is just like, actually here black is playing some inaccurate moves. Here, this outside pass pawn, black can just leave it there and just go up with the king, like king h6, king g5. And I think this is just completely winning for black, because white will need to use the knight or the king to take this pawn, but that will take a lot of moves, and black can use this time to get the king up the board and push the pawns and gobble up white's kingside pawns, so there's no reason for black not to win this. But unfortunately, probably during the game, both sides are under time pressure, especially for black, and black is just playing inaccurate moves, pushing the pawns instead of going up with the king, and after king c4, push, like, this is just unnecessary, basically. Black is just kind of forgetting to go up with the king, and after, like, a few moves like this, yeah, this is now just a pure drawish position, and after, like, a few moves like this, immediately, yeah, both sides agreed to a draw here, because after knight f1 or knight g4, black will, the knight will just keep jumping to these squares, and just like a square here, and this pawn on f6 is dead already, and if you attack my knight, I'm gonna go knight e2, and if you go there, I'm gonna go knight g4, and there's no way for black's pawn to keep on pushing. Where like if black's pawn were like found a way to be pushed, there's now like here, and well, I'll just take the pawn, and yeah, this is just gonna be a draw. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed this game as well as learned a lot of things from it, as well. The opening part, the king's Indian defense, as well as how white, like not white, but how black, wait a second, who is actually white is the side who is down a pawn in the end, but immediately found a way to hold the draw. So you can also learn a lot of things from white's defensive moves, as well as like how to win in the endgame part for black. To go up with the king, that's it. Alright, in the endgame part, you always have to remember to go up with the king. Your king's activeness is really important in endgames. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed this game as well as this video. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!